All right. Hey, Johnny, thanks for calling in from Canton, Ohio. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jerry. It's great to see you, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you this morning.
Awesome. Yeah. Whenever Karen Schwab or Tom Schwab reach out to me from Interview Valet, um, I know they've done their homework, and sure enough, I do my homework, and then this is gonna be good. That's I'm just telling the audience right now, this is going to be good. If I got the background right, you just recently retired as the president and CEO of Camping World.
I was the president and chief business development officer.
Business development officer. There we go. Now I'm familiar with Camping World because I'm a ultralight backpacker, and I would keep going to Camping World thinking that I was going to find ultralight backpacking gear, and it's like all these RVs. I'm like, oh yeah. You would think I would learn after years of backpacking that, but anyway, I'd start shopping because eventually there's a day where I won't be able to backpack, and or I just want to do it. Tim Winders. I don't know if you've met him. Tim Winders is a podcaster who's a business coach. He and his wife sold all their possessions a few years back, and they actually live in their RV and they travel the country and they podcast from their country. So I need to connect you to that. Okay.
Yeah,
Note to self.
I've actually heard of him, and you can get so many things at Camping World for your home and your RV, and certainly your outdoor lifestyle.
Yes.
So keep going back, Jerry.
Yeah, I will. Oh yeah. My wife just gets nervous when I go there because she's like, "Hey, what are you buying now?" I'm like, and y'all can't see this, but in front of me is all my camping gear in my podcast studio. So at any given moment, I'm ready to go. But that's not why we got you on here, because your story actually has a lot of ups and downs to it, and a lot of lessons around resiliency and reframing of mindset. And so some of the things that stood out to me is essentially like the beyond the rut story. You married your college sweetheart. In college, you were in a fraternity. She was in a sorority, so you got boxes checked there. You had careers that both paid well. Check. And then you had this part of your lives where you wanted to have children, and then that was your biggest struggle. And one of the things I wanted to share with you and the audience, the thing that stood out to me in your book, was this horrifying moment. It's not the worst part of the book, guys, but for me it was horrifying because I stopped breathing for 3 or 4 pages, and it was when Susan is going in for a procedure to extract some eggs, and you're in the lobby with your mother and your mother-in-law, and things are okay. You're worried about Susan, you're praying for Susan, and then the medical staff come out and they're like, "Hey, it's time for your contribution." I stopped breathing at that point because that is like teenage Jerry's horrors coming to life, but like you lived it. And so I don't know how you did what you did, knowing that they were out there, knowing what you were doing. And so guys, you got to read the book for a lot more reasons than that scene, but it led to a very disheartening or sad point in your lives after that, because that moment led to triplets on the way, and you wound up losing all 3 triplets, and that in essence was the roller coaster you both experienced for a long time. What was that like, going through those ups and downs together?
So I like the way you phrased that, because we definitely did go through it together. Jerry, when any of us are in a rut, and I love the title of your podcast, because so many of us fall into those ruts in different seasons in our lives. And we fell into a rut after being at the peak of our lives. I mean, our careers are going amazing. We're madly in love. We have amazing friends, amazing family. I mean, everything's going so well that we were kind of pinching ourselves like, this is too good to be true. And then it wasn't, right? And it was only too good to be true until it wasn't. And so for us, we did go through the entire journey together. As you just referenced, some of it was a little too much togetherness, when after years of keeping it secret, that I insisted to my wife that we invite my mom and her mom to the egg retrieval at the hospital when we were doing in vitro. And I didn't fully think through that. Susan thought it was a bad idea, that we should do that alone. And I just thought it was a great family experience. I don't know who thinks their mothers should be at their conception of their grandchildren, but for some reason, it sounded right to me in a good togetherness moment.
Sorry.
So I blew that for sure. I did not handle that well, and it was almost like a Seinfeld episode in that setting when I had to get up and leave the room while Susan was in surgery. But beyond that, how we went through it together is, we continued to have hope and faith. We did become terribly desperate as the time went on. And what we realized was when we hit our low after Nicholas, Mary, and Peter died, we had 2 sons and a daughter, triplets, as you mentioned. And after they passed away, when we thought that we were at our low, we really went on to find that we did not get out of that rut. It was, a long time behind us and a long time ahead of us before this dark cloud was going to be lifted. And so we chose very actively to grieve together, to not grieve apart from each other. We said that we were going to remain committed to each other and to our goal. But, you spend a lot of time at a cemetery and sitting close to your kids, to just be physically by them, to have that proximity and that connection to them. And, a couple grieves differently after child loss, and different times and different days. We stayed pretty much on the same cycle, but then we're understanding for the other when one was up and one was down. One was trying to get on. And for me, so much of that moving on felt unnatural. It just didn't seem appropriate to look for joy, to laugh, to be happy, when really how we define success in creating a family, we were failing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember that part of your lives where you just lost the triplets, and a couple comes out of the woodwork, like some acquaintances, you like they weren't close friends, it sounded like, and they came up to you and they gave you some very valuable advice. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, what? They taught us so much. It was truly an acquaintance couple that we eventually became close to. But they came to our house uninvited the night before the funeral. And, we opened the door and they're standing there, and we were a little surprised. But their boldness and their boldness in love, their boldness and compassion, really just blew us away. I mean, we were so moved by it. And they explained that they had lost a baby at a week old, and their son died about 20 years earlier. And they talked to us about their marriage. They talked to us about how others might view the situation. Oftentimes, infant death is different, is looked at differently than death later in life. And we came to understand that and have respect for any stage that you lose a child. But some people didn't have an understanding of what it is like to lose an infant. And so, we learned from them that compassion really doesn't know limits. And with a good heart and following that heart, it helped us to be more bold with others in reaching out. And really, it shaped the course of my business career. I mean, a simple setting like that, where someone just took such a big step to show up at someone's house the night before a funeral after a tragic event, it was really just a beautiful gesture.
Yeah. And they're the ones who shared with you the importance of grieving together and staying together and being proactive about getting through this season together. And you didn't mention the statistic in there, but it is high. The number of couples that end up divorcing after the loss of a child is staggeringly high. I think it's around the 85% range, give or take a few points. So now that compels me to have to go find the actual stat so I can put it in the show notes, guys. I'm sorry. But it is high. And so to have somebody reach out to you through compassion and let you know, the hardest part is actually coming forward for the two of you. And this is why it's important for the two of you to be together. And you mentioned in your book that wasn't just advice you applied to yourselves, but you found yourselves paying it forward for other couples. So your pain in a way became a ministry to others. Would that sound accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you go through a tough time, when life is hard, right? The title of my book, when life is hard, but I'll be okay. When you go through a tough time, you're asking yourself, how am I going to survive this? And that's probably the appropriate initial question to ask. But if you continue to ask yourself more questions and go deeper in it and start the reframing process, we can talk a little bit about that. I went deeper to say, what am I going to learn through this? How can this situation improve my life? And that's a strange question because the situation nearly destroyed our lives.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get out of bed in the morning. And so, we had a hard time getting through a work day and, not going to the cemetery every day after work or before work. And so literally to say, how can this situation improve my life? How can Nicholas, Mary, and Peter dying be something that I can be a better man for, be a better husband, hopefully someday a better father? How can this situation make me better? And, can I get this situation to allow the tragedy to serve as a foundation of growth that my wife and I can springboard off of? And all of that reframing really began to happen. And then it gave us clarity and purpose for, number one, what we needed to do to reframe their lives as not just a tragic event, because that seemed disrespectful to them. I can remember just using the term disrespectful so many times then, because I could feel that, some might disrespect the severity and the pain of the situation through their well-intended comments of, well, at least you didn't know them very well. And at least you didn't, have a lot of time together. So that would have made it so much harder. And, technically, maybe it would have been much harder to lose a 2-year-old versus a newborn. But we also didn't have 2 years of joy, or losing a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old. We also didn't get those years of joy. So at the time, we couldn't quite understand that. As we did go on through very complicated and extenuating circumstances to have other children, we saw a different perspective there. So we could understand the spirit of what they were saying. It still stung as they said it. But we really realized that, for us, it needed to be something that they were not disrespected by the time between their birth certificate and their death certificate. We're going to quantify the significance of their life. That felt disrespectful to me. And so whether your life is a day or 85 years, there's meaning and value in it. And so for us, we needed to fill that rut, fill those holes with the joy and the genuine joy that we did experience while they were alive, because God did give us a grace during that time where we said it then and we say it now, we were the happiest people in that hospital. Ultimately, intellectually, we knew what was going to happen, but it hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
And so they were still breathing. We were still holding them and loving them. And, for that, we saw a lot of beauty, and we received a gift in their birth, and we're not going to see it in any other way.
Yeah. Oh, man. And it was such a beautiful way that you had told that in the book as well. And, that is something valuable for everybody to remember, is how precious life is, and how short it is, how fragile it is. And I think in some ways, if we remember that, we start to appreciate the time we have right here in front of us, as opposed to, I'll get to that later, or someday I'll. It's when it comes to like pursuing your dream or your purpose, you always hear folks talk about someday I will do blank. And I refer to it as someday I'll, like someday island. It's just, enjoy the people around you, the ones who matter the most, which everybody's got value. So what are some of the things that you would do to, I think you mentioned them, like the questions you would ask to help reframe your mindset on a situation. You've actually been sharing that up to this point. But then going back to that part about going through the process together as a couple, were there some practical guidelines that you both held to that helped you stay on the same page, or get to the same page, or get through those moments where it was just hard for either one or both of you?
Well, one thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, Jerry, is the fact that in our vows that we wrote for each other, and so we, scripted our own vows. We did not use the conventional vows. And one of the vows that we wrote was, "I promise to see your viewpoint in all, as you must see mine."
Yes.
And so it was a promise to each other, and also a statement to each other that you must see mine, right? And so I was very aware of that statement that Susan made to me, "You must see mine." And so, a man and a woman go through a pregnancy and a loss differently at times. Of course, Susan's going through it physically. I was inducing the drugs into her. I was injecting those into her daily. And so I had that side of it that felt unnatural to me. It felt my anxiety got going of worrying about what the chemicals I'm putting in her and the hormones, and could this lead to cancer at some point in her life? Things that scared me. And so when in her early 40s, when she needed a double mastectomy, there was something in me that said, a seed was planted that I was worrying about something. Maybe that contributed to her tumor that she had in her breast, or maybe not. I don't know. And we'll never really know, but I know that was something that I thought about. And so in promising to see each other's viewpoints, we clung to that vow, and, we really never realized how significant that vow was going to be. And so in loss, in trying to move forward, you might have viewpoints that the other doesn't have. I had a greater guilt after we adopted. I don't want to ruin too much of the book there.
Yeah, I only got to the part where you're about to meet Bo.
Spoiler alert there. That's our guy, Bo. And, I do, I've always told the kids that, one of them is adopted, and I don't remember which one, but now I have a book that proves which one.
Right. Yeah. You documented it here.
It was Bo. Bo was the adopted one. And so, that I felt more guilt associated with being happy than Susan did. And Susan couldn't identify with that. She appropriately, and I think my wife appropriately, deals with things better than I do in general, with less anxiety, less active thoughts conflicting in her head. She's got a calmer mind and just a much easier tone about her always and naturally. But she understood the guilt that I was feeling when I was so happy and holding our son. Yet just my heart was breaking, feeling like, oh, you could so easily move on and replace them with another. Those things just didn't feel right to me. And so she understood my journey in that. And when we were in therapy and we saw an amazing psychologist, Dr. Barb Fordyce, who's a dear friend today and a business partner, and we do a lot of public speaking and corporate engagements together. And we literally spent that much time in her office that she got to know me so well that, she said we could be good business partners because we took the learnings that she gave and we really brought it to life and brought it back to her with proof that her teachings of cognitive reshaping can work in the cognitive behavioral therapies that she walked us through. So, we put those to use and to good work, and we got out of that rut of their death, only to be followed by life staying hard and new ruts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Y'all went like one after the other after the triplets. Paraguay. I don't want to give away too much for those who haven't read the book yet. You got to get the book, guys, because you go to Paraguay to adopt. That doesn't work out. You have a pair of twins on the way. They miscarry, and again, whatever happens from chapter 11 on, and I did skip forward. I needed to know, like, how I got to see the pictures at least. So I do know that there is a happier ending to this, and you have gotten through a lot of those hurdles, and y'all, you've heard it here so far. I mean, they've done things like working on reframing. They held onto their vow to see the other person's point of view, and also expect the other person to see their own point of view, and that is huge. Now, your personal life, though, also influenced your business life in a positive way. I'm a firm believer that, we don't necessarily separate our character to have two sets of character, like the business character and the family life character. Like you are the same person in both, and your character is there. And so you're going through all this with Susan, trying to have a family with children, and you get this moment where you're back at the workplace and you found out that this family-owned business that your dad started has now developed a toxic environment. And you're able to apply a lot of what you've gained from reframing and hardship and seeing you and your wife at your worst. How did that lead towards forward focus in that program? So shifting gears here from family to now this business application, this leadership application. Tell us about, forward focus and how your life experiences led to this business transformation.
So I'm really not a believer, Jerry, in the work-life balance. Because as I see that, it's just life, right? And yes, we have our work life and we have our personal life, but that falls under the heading of life. And we have the same heart and the same mind, and the same character and the same integrity that we bring into the workplace and that we bring into our home place. And I don't believe that we can genuinely switch gears and be a awful person at work, somebody that beats people up at work, is tough on employees, yelling, screaming, harsh, and then cross the threshold at home and walk in and be kind, loving, nurturing, welcoming to our children, to our spouse. I just think we're the same person at both places. And it made me recognize that as unhappy, unhappy and lost as I was at home, when I got to work, I felt the same. And it made me start looking at my company that I was leading. My dad was retired at that point. He got cancer and had to stop working when I was 28. And it was all on me. And I realized the culture that I allowed, all for the desire for business success. And I realized that I had a responsibility to our team to create a culture at work that ultimately makes them better for their real purpose in life when they go home. Mother, father, sister, daughter, husband, grandmother, whatever it is, right? Friend, caretaker, whatever your role is when you go home, that really, really matters. And I'm never saying that our work life doesn't matter. It does. But then the thing that kind of gives us nourishment to fill up to go back to work the next day, because it's really a cycle, right? Have a wonderful home life, get nourished and energized to go into your work day, have a fulfilling and completing work day that you could be energized and ready to go back home and have that great cycle working and have a good flow there. And I had let them down by allowing a culture that just perpetuated disrespect, teams criticizing each other. And then ultimately, and most importantly, that affected customer service. Because I've always said that my employees and we are not actors. And so you could not, come out of a sales meeting where the sales leader beats you up and then you walk out there on the floor and see the first customer and just be genuinely offering great customer service.
Right. Yeah.
And so, for me, I saw that as an opportunity to say, I'm going to take this post-traumatic growth opportunity, the trauma we just experienced at home, and I've got to look forward, because when I look back, it's too painful. And so I created Forward Focus. And in Forward Focus is what I liked about myself and my solutions, and the great people around me that can help bring things better, my talents, my skills, all that's in forward thinking. And backward thinking is my weaknesses, my insecurities, the problems sit there, blaming others sits there. And so from that, I went on a year-long journey and told the employees that at the end of this year, everyone's employment is up for reevaluation. And this is the culture that we're going to work in. Might not be what you're looking for. No worries. I respect that. It's just that you'll need to find employment somewhere else, or I'll encourage you to do that. And that's ultimately what was done. And at the end of that year, I relieved about 2 people from a team of about 70, that the others really absorbed it. No one hit perfection, because none of us can, but they had a commitment and a desire to recognize. Doesn't mean that they still didn't make mistakes at work or they weren't harsh at times, but that we had a culture established that we said, wait a minute, not here. That's not how we do things. Mm-hmm. And they knew from instruction, from reading materials they were given, from our company newsletter, from me speaking twice a month at company meetings, they knew how we do it, right? I did clarify that. I showed them what conflict resolution looks like. And I'm a believer that insecurity is the root source of all workplace conflict. So we were able to talk to people about when they're lashing out, that they have an insecurity that they're now projecting onto someone else in another situation. And we're going to get to the bottom of that, and we're going to talk about it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to have to write down insecurity real quick. Yes. My day job, by the way, is doing leadership development, team building for a healthcare organization. I never thought about that. Insecurity, though, being the root of some of these.
It's the root of all workplace conflict. Right? I've seen it, Jerry, at every income level, whether I had associates making $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, $2 million a year, that when they lashed out, when they got aggressive, there was an insecurity in them. And they were trying to protect their territory. So maybe their insecurity was if someone else is shining, they might take some of my responsibilities. They might take some of my upward career mobility. Mm-hmm. You know, at Camping World, I was blessed to lead and be part of an executive team leading over 10,000 employees. It was, a $4 billion a year in annual sales company with, stores in 38 states. We were all over the country and growing and building more stores. And in that upward mobility and growth environment, it was so prevalent to see insecurities of someone's future career plans. And then we would see how people would act out in ways that would create conflict at work. And as leaders, we can look at that and say, some of that we're creating because we're allowing that insecurity to surface. We're not providing security for them so that they see a clear career path moving ahead. We've perpetuated and allowed a culture where someone can take their insecurities, lash out at others, but because of, maybe avoidance, not desiring to deal with conflict resolution, it just becomes rampant.
Yes.
And, you have a big company, small company, it's very common there as well, but you have a big company and then you could have thousands and thousands of insecure people.
Yes. Yes. And people playing it safe and disengaging so they don't get wounded in their insecurities. Especially in a time and age where you need your staff to take risks, to feel safe enough to take risks, to take care of your customer, to take care of each other. And oh man. Oh, wow. All right. That was for me worth the price of admission right there. On top of everything else we talked about.
There's so much that you can apply there in your work in the healthcare space, because I've been on the board of a large health system for 20 years. Uh-huh. And, I've seen firsthand where leadership impacts quality of care.
Yeah.
Right. So in my business, we were in the recreation business, right? We were creating and fulfilling dreams for people for their leisure time, for their family time. So that was super fun. Take that into a healthcare setting where it's life and death.
Yes.
And leadership can impact the quality of care, just like it impacts quality of customer service.
Yeah. Oh,
and some might say, oh, that's not true, because the quality of care will always be a priority. I challenge that, because when someone is treated poorly and their mind is in another place, when their mind is recanting how their boss just ripped them apart and tore them down, maybe publicly, those thoughts are swirling through their mind as they need to be administering drugs, having just an interaction with a patient. So the quality of care doesn't have to be something along the extent of malpractice in a bad surgery.
Yeah.
It could just be in the quality of compassionate care when you're interacting with a patient, that, as we know today, where Medicare payments can be based on the quality assurance scores that hospitals get based on the patients, filling out surveys, those surveys are important.
Yeah.
And people, they're going to assume that you're giving them the right drugs, right? That's a standard that you have to do. But do you do it with compassion and care? And I think about a nurse that, when my wife had her double mastectomy, and she came in, and my wife had in her hands a clinging cross. I had rosary beads in my hand, and we were sitting there, at 6 a.m. waiting for the IVs to be put in. And she comes in and sees that we're clearly a faith-based couple. And she was going to start the day with the IVs before Susan went into pre-op. And she just saw how troubled we were, and she asked us if she could pray with us. And Jerry, that it changed the start of that day.
Yeah.
Where that level of compassion, of care was put there. And then the nurse in the pre-op area that literally helped me lift my kids off their mom, saying goodbye to her, and then me, and walk us out of the pre-op area, who stopped and hugged me and said, you need a hug before you go back and rejoin with your kids. You talk about quality of care.
Yeah.
That's over the top. And I did not have concern for the surgeon. I knew he was world-class. He was going to do an amazing job in that double mastectomy. But our hearts were breaking, and we were fearful of what those biopsies would show. That's what we needed.
Yeah.
And so, I get really excited about that conversation, because it's a game changer. It's a difference maker.
Yeah. Because we're not just treating an ailment or a malady. You're treating a whole person, and that whole person comes with emotions, fears, concerns, hopes, dreams. And this applies outside of healthcare. I mean, it's people who lead teams. You are leading people, and maybe they're going through a tough time. Maybe they're going through a great time. Are you able to celebrate and be there with them when they have those moments of pain and suffering? And can you bring your human self? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that, there is that connection of who I am as a person that's with me when I'm at home and with me when I go to work. Like, there is no switch flipping that. And if there is, I mean, you got to ask yourself, like, am I happy doing this? Do I feel like an honest person living in an honest life? And chances are, if you got a different personality at work than you do at home, you probably hate yourself in some way, shape, or form, because you're not living an authentic life. And Johnny, so far we've talked about the struggle that you and Susan had gone through trying to have children, the importance of working together, grieving together, seeing each other from the other person's point of view. We've talked about forward focus, leading the whole person, setting culture, letting go of those who don't want to be a part of that team culture, and then providing that sense of safety so that people can be themselves, take risks for the organization, take care of customers, that kind of thing, learn from their mistakes, and so on. And folks, Johnny's book is Life is Hard, But I'll Be Okay. He got that title from a speaking engagement he had done. Somebody had asked him a question, and his answer was, life is hard, but I'll be okay. Where can folks find this book? And if they want more, they want you to speak at their organization, they want you to run a workshop, how can they get more Johnny Sirpilla?
Well, thank you, Jerry. Yes, my book, very, very proud of the book right now and how it's doing. It has hit number one international bestseller on Amazon in 14 categories. It's currently the number one hot new release in 19 categories on Amazon. So it's available, of course, on Amazon, other online book retailers as well. It is available on my website, www.encourage33.com. So that's the name of my company, is called Encourage. So encourage33.com. On Instagram, at Johnny Sirpilla, also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and my website is a great way to email me as well. My email is johnny@encourage33.com.
Nice. Johnny, and before we go, any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Well, I want to comment on the one thing that you said, because when you were talking about those nurses and how they're treating that patient, I see that even an extension of that, Jerry, those nurses were treating the entire family. The doctor was treating the patient and the entire family. And they recognized that nurse, the doctor, who is phenomenal as well, the surgeon, that was that same good-hearted nurse at home, and she brought that right into work with her. She didn't have a division in that space and in personality. Leaders lead the employee, And they also lead their mindset that when they go home, that leader can have an impact on a family. That leader can have an impact on if that mom or dad goes home from work and is abusive at home, where they can take out their power because they were abused at work. They were treated poorly at work. They were talked down to. They were belittled. They go home where they have authority and power, and they can take that out there. And as leaders, if we allow that, we are part of that cycle. Just like that nurse was treating the entire family, we as leaders, when we allow that at work, we are mistreating that entire family. And so I challenge people to think about that, because it is real. There is an authority and a responsibility that comes with being a leader. And when you accept that title for your own career growth, for your paycheck growth, I want to challenge people to realize that it's not all about you. And there's a responsibility that goes with that. And that's thinking about those that you're leading, and then ultimately who they impact, because you impact them too.
Nice. That's the perfect way to end that, Johnny. Thank you so much for being on here, Johnny. And I mean, yes, and I'm going to be finishing this book as soon as we're done. So thank you.
Appreciate you.